Finance Minister Mathias Cormann on this big story of the day. Minister, you've copped a bit of flack, it has to be said, since August of last year and your role in all of that. Some people said you've been damaged by it. What do you say to your critics this morning after that big win in the Senate?
Well, look, I mean, at all times in this job, I always seek to do the right thing for the right reasons in the right way. That's what I did in August last year. I didn't bring on the surprise leadership spill, but I certainly was in a unique position to help resolve the mess that we were in at that time to ensure that the government was in the best possible position to successfully contest the subsequent election, which of course we did. Look, I mean, in this game, you always have a lot of commentators. You've always got a lot of people throwing rocks at you from the sidelines. But in the end, in yourself, you've got to know that whatever decision you make, that you are motivated by doing the right thing for the right reasons in the right way for the Australian people. And that's what I did then, and that's what I've continued to try and do every single day.
But this is a big win, $158 billion tax plan, the signature policy item of the election. You've got this crossbench across the line in the Senate. It must feel pretty sweet this Friday morning.
Well, look, I mean, we're very grateful to Senators Bernardi, Lambie, Patrick and Griff for having supported our plan for lower income taxes for all working Australians. I mean, it's a plan that we took to the election. It's a plan that is in our national interest, and it's a plan that the Australian people endorsed and wanted to see passed. I mean, this will now put more money into workers' pockets from the end of next week, prioritising low and middle income earners in the first instance, but it also means that we're phasing in structural reform to our tax system to take the bracket creep monkey off people's back, because of course if you leave bracket creep unaddressed, it does undermine aspiration and it does weaken the economy over time. I mean, everybody knows that bracket creep is a drag on the economy, but for some reason the Labor Party and some others seem to think that there's no circumstance in which we should do anything about it.
I think Labor's point, though, is, and I'm interested to get your thoughts on the economic merits of this argument, because when you deal with and resolve bracket creep, as you say, it's in a few years from now. We don't know what the economy is going to look like. There are enormous trade tensions right now. You yourself have said there are global headwinds. Are you sure that that later stage, the third stage, is sustainable?
Well, Labor's position has been all over the place and completely and utterly inconsistent. I mean, in the campaign they were arguing for $387 billion in higher taxes, even though we knew about global economic headwinds then. Now they've said that we should bring forward tax cuts to help the economy given our global economic headwinds. And the implication of the argument that you've just put to me is that if the headwinds persist in 5 or 6 years from now, that somehow we should increase taxes again. Well, that's obviously not the case. In order to ensure that our economy remains strong and resilient in the context of the challenges that we face in a global environment, but also in the context of the opportunities that we can seize, we need to ensure that our tax system incentivises effort and hard work, rewards effort and hard work. Of course, ensuring that Australians get to keep more of the money they earn and are not penalised and pushed into the higher income tax bracket is a very important part of our plan to keep the economy strong. So the proposition somehow that if the economy was facing headwinds in 5 years' time, that this would mean that we should increase taxes is just ludicrous, and it's completely inconsistent with what Labor's been arguing, in this past week that we should do right now. So, look, I mean, and if Labor really is intent on increasing taxes again, I mean, they've got the option to go to the next election and campaign for higher income taxes again, and they can, if they can persuade the Australian people that higher income taxes are a good idea, when we all know that it would weaken the economy and lessen opportunity for Australians to get ahead, well, they can go their hardest.
Can you reassure our viewers this morning that your fiscal policy, your government's economic and budgetary policy is in tune with the RBA's monetary policy? Are you doing enough in terms of stimulus? Particularly, I'm thinking in terms of infrastructure spending, in terms of industrial relations reform. Is there enough being done right now, given the softening nature of the economy?
Kieran, I mean, monetary policy and fiscal policy in Australia is absolutely heading in the same direction, absolutely heading in the same direction. Over the last 2 years, we have legislated $302 billion worth of income tax cuts, which, of course, provide a massive stimulus into the economy. I mean, we've also rolled out, we are rolling out a $100 billion infrastructure investment pipeline. We're pursuing an ambitious free trade agenda. I mean, at the end of this term, we are working to ensure that more than 90% of all of our exports are covered through free trade agreements, which help us protect and improve our market access in markets around the world. I mean, of course, we're focused on making sure that we put the economy on the strongest possible foundation trajectory for the future. Our budget is a pro-growth budget. Our budget was put together in the context of reviewing the same sort of information the Reserve Bank of Australia has been reviewing as they make their decisions on monetary policy. We are absolutely heading in the same direction, and we'll continue to execute our plan for a stronger economy, which we took to the last election.
Your colleague Josh Frydenberg and yourself, Prime Minister as well, spoken a lot about the $100 billion infrastructure plan. Is there room to expedite some of that, to basically heed the warning of Governor Lowe this week, the RBA Governor?
Well, to be honest, I mean, I think that his comments have been over-interpreted, I would say. I mean, we have a $100 billion infrastructure investment pipeline, about half of that over the forward estimates. I mean, obviously, all measures are always under review, and as I've said on a number of occasions now, I mean, between every budget and budget update, the government, of course, continues to monitor all of the economic data, all of the relevant information that comes out of the economy, and we continue to make judgments, and that's what we've always done. That's what we always will do. And I mean, every 6 months you have a further formal update, or I guess once a year you've got another budget, and the government will continue to make policy decisions to ensure that Australia is on the strongest possible economic and fiscal foundation and trajectory for the future, so that Australians have the best possible opportunity to get ahead today and into the future.
So you're flexible on that front in terms of being, applying the policies appropriate to the economic situation. Are you also flexible when it comes to industrial relations? Because this is an area where it's been off limits for some time. The Prime Minister said he's going to look at it. What sort of thing can be done, do you think, without spooking, creating concern among those that have been your critics in the past?
Well, I disagree that it's been off limits for some time. I mean, we've passed substantial reforms in the last Parliament, including the restoration of the Australian Building and Construction Commission, and indeed the establishment of the Registered Organisations Commission, and a whole series of other reforms that were passed through the Parliament in the last term of government. But look, this is obviously not my area of portfolio responsibility. This is very much the area of responsibility for Christian Porter, our Attorney General and Minister for Industrial Relations, and I will let him spell out, our agenda for the future in those areas.
I've had a bit of feedback in the last 24 hours when the Centre Alliance announced that they've done a deal with you on gas. Some concern from the industry that this might enter the realm of sovereign risk. Can you reassure those in those relevant companies that this won't adversely affect supply contracts that they've already entered into in export markets in terms of their gas supply?
Well, I mean, the first point to make is, our government has got a long-standing commitment to bring down the cost of electricity. We've got a long-standing commitment to bring down the cost of gas and to boost the supply of gas into the domestic market. We have announced various measures in the past, and, for example, the IDGSM, which is, of course, designed to ensure appropriate supplies of gas into the domestic market on the East Coast in particular. That was established a little while ago now, and there is a scheduled review. I mean, so none of these things should come as a surprise. Of course, we are committed to pursuing policies that, in the public interest, which will help bring down the cost of electricity, which will help bring down the price of gas. I mean, we have worked together, and we've exchanged a lot of information with Centre Alliance in recent weeks at various meetings that have been publicly canvassed in the past. Centre Alliance clearly is very comfortable with where the government is heading. We'll continue to engage with them in good faith in terms of some of the reforms that the government is already considering. So, you know, I mean, this is business as usual. This is what we have been doing. That's what we're going to continue to do into the future.
Will this adversely affect contracts? Will this potentially adversely impact contracts that they've already entered into in export markets?
We haven't made any further policy decisions. We are exploring options on how we can continue to pursue our long-standing and well-established objective and policy commitment to bring down the cost of electricity and to bring down the price of gas, you know, on the East Coast, and to boost supply of gas into the domestic market. So, I mean, you know, as these processes play out, obviously, you know, any reviews of you know, policy change and the like will be subject to scrutiny. Will be you know, obviously explored through processes that will be openly and transparently canvassed at that time.
Are you worried about the sovereign risk message if you do impact the export supply contracts already entered into?
Well, Kieran, like, if you look back at what we've done over the last 3 or 4 years in this space, you know, we've changed policy, and some people will say, well, you know, some people obviously have raised a series of questions as we did those things, but we pursued them in the public interest in order to bring electricity prices down, in order to bring you know, the price of gas down, and the price of gas is well below where it had been at its peak. But we do believe that there is further opportunity to do more, and we will continue to work in good faith with all interested parties to help achieve that. Now, you know, obviously there will be conversations along the way. So,
no sovereign risk issue?
Okay. Well, I mean, your definition there, I mean, what the implication of your proposition there is that governments should never ever assess potential policy change in the public interest in order to achieve, for example, a reduction in the price of electricity and a reduction in the price of gas. I mean, if your proposition is that any consideration of policy change in the public interest causes sovereign risk issues, well, that is a very expansive interpretation on your part.
It's not so much that, it's more about the retrospective nature of some of the application of those policies.
Well, I think that you're getting way ahead of yourself. I mean, like, the government's policy right now is, as has been announced and publicly stated in the past. I mean, but there is a process for us to consider further reforms to ensure that we secure even better outcomes. I mean, that is business as usual for the government. But what we, you know, and in the context of this process, we have engaged with Centre Alliance over the last 3 or 4 weeks, you know, in particular to explain what we have been doing and the impact that has had, including to explain what we were considering and where we were thinking of going. But I mean, there's still a lot of water to go under the bridge to, you know, make some of those judgments. And as those judgments are made, obviously, you know, people will be able to ask all of these questions at that point.
Minister, appreciate your time as always, and congrats, a big win in the Parliament this week.
It's a great win for the Australian people.